Now that there's been sufficient time to reflect on President Park Geun-hye's U.S. visit, it's time now to get down to business. To examine the challenges facing Korea as it enters this new era of relations with the United States, we are joined this week by somebody who was with the president during her trip. Former ambassador and current lawmaker of the Saenuri Party, Shim Yoon-jo. Lawmaker Shim Yoon-jo of the ruling Saenuri Party. Since passing the High Diplomatic Service examination, he has filled various posts in the field of international trade, including as Director General of the North American Affairs Bureau in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and as Secretary to the President for Foreign Affairs and Trade. He recently traveled to China as a member of President Park Geun-hye's first special envoy team, and he also accompanied President Park on her visit to the United States. He is currently a member of the National Assembly's Foreign Affairs and Unification Committee, as well as a member of the Special Committee on Inter-Korean Relations. Now, we've had a few weeks now to reflect on President Park's visit to the U.S. How would you now assess that visit?
Well, I think it was one of the most successful visits by a Korean president to the United States. And I would like to assess the outcome in three aspects. First aspect is North Korea. As you know well, North Korea has ratcheted up its military threat to South Korea through long-range missile launching and third nuclear test, and also the shutdown of the Kaesong Industrial Complex since late last year. So this was reflected to the summit. And a second aspect is the alliance. This year is the 60th anniversary of the alliance, so the two leaders agreed to issue the joint declaration in commemoration of the 60th anniversary of the alliance. In that declaration, they characterized the alliance as the comprehensive strategic alliance, which means the alliance has developed into global alliance. And also it characterizes the alliance as a linchpin for the peace and stability in the Asia Pacific. And third aspect is a broader one, that is the newly emerging or changing order in Northeast Asia. As we have witnessed, there have been leadership change or second term in the leadership in many countries in the US, China, Russia, and Japan, and also in North and South Korea. And China has been rising, and the US has announced the pivot to Asia or rebalancing its posture in Asia, and Japanese conservatism, movement, and Russia's attention to the Far East. So this means the new order in East Asia or Northeast Asia is being reshaped. And the alliance between the US and South Korea will play a central role in reshaping this order. In fact, in the declaration, the two countries, Korea and the US, will shape the future of Asia. So in these three aspects, I think we have succeeded in many outcomes.
You were there in the U.S. with President Park. I'm curious what sort of feedback you heard from Obama administration officials and the U.S. Congress regarding President Park's vision for a trust-building process here on the peninsula.
Well, it was also expressed in the joint declaration, and the U.S. expressed its support to the South Korea's initiative by saying the U.S. and South Korea will work for the peace and stability through the trust-building process initiated by President Park. And also President Obama made it clear in the joint press conference that South Korea's initiative is compatible with the U.S. position. That means the U.S. has acknowledged the South Korea's lead in dealing with the North Korean issue.
Regarding the trust-building process on the peninsula, what happens next?
Well, the trust-building process consists of two pillars. One is deterrence, the other is dialogue. And when we had the summit with the US, the pillar of deterrence was a little much more, emphasized, because at that time the overall environment was influenced by the North Korean threat. So we have to emphasize the deterrence aspect, and I think we have succeeded in establishing military readiness based upon the robust alliance with the US. And now it is time to activate the dialogue pillar and to initiate the trust building process. It is necessary for us to provide the humanitarian assistance to North Korea. And also it is important to implement the mutually beneficial exchange and cooperation projects. By this, we can accumulate the trust between the two Koreas. And as we accumulate the trust, and also as we have substantive progress in the denuclearization, we can expand the size and the scale and scope of our cooperation with North Korea.
There are some out there, however, who say that there should have been a more substantive solution to come out of the talks between Presidents Park and Obama. Is that a fair critique? Should there have been more to come out of those talks?
Well, I think they have discussed almost everything they could. Some people say that it would be better to take a different approach for the dialogue. But as I told you, at that time, the general environment was influenced by the North Korean military threat or possible provocations. So it was quite natural to emphasize the pillar of deterrence, or the importance of the military alliance between Korea and the US to establish the military readiness to retaliate any kind of North Korea's military provocation.
In the U.S., in her interview with CBS, President Park said, quote, North Korea must change. The official response from the Saenuri Party following the summit was that, quote, we urge North Korea to change. At this point, what sort of change can we expect out of Pyongyang, and is it realistic to expect change?
Well, the first and foremost change we expect North Korea to do is the denuclearization. Even though the North Korean leader's special envoy, Vice Marshal Che, proposed a dialogue, but he has never touched upon the denuclearization. That's why we have skepticism about the sincerity of North Korea, even though we resume the dialogue with North Korea. So we would like to see North Korea's change in showing its sincerity in undertaking the denuclearization measure. And also the second change you would like to see is the sincere dialogue with us, especially in solving or reopening the Kaesong Industrial Complex. We have proposed many times to have the working level meeting, working level talks with North Korea to reopen the Kaesong Industrial Complex, but they have proposed another commemorative meeting for the June 15 joint declaration instead of accepting our dialogue overture. So we don't think North Korea has shown its sincerity for dialogue. So I think it's very important for North Korea to accept our dialogue overture for solving the Kaesong Industrial Complex problem. And finally, we would like to hope that North Korea will become a responsible member in the international community by abiding by its obligations and commitments to the international community.
What are the right steps to take then for South Korea regarding this dialogue proposal from Vice Marshal Che?
Well, even though we have skepticism in North Korea's sincerity to propose that dialogue, it would be desirable for us to cultivate the momentum of dialogue. In that dialogue, we can to undertake the denuclearization. So the denuclearization should be the objective of the process, not the precondition. And also, it's very important to continue the international sanctions on North Korea unless there is substantive progress in denuclearization. If not, we will repeat the previous vicious circle of provocation and reward through dialogue. So we have to cut off that previous vicious circle by continuing our international sanctions on North Korea.
All of this friction, all of these tensions on the peninsula are making investors throughout the world a bit jittery, a bit nervous about investing here in Korea. While you were in the U.S. with President Park, you held a business roundtable meeting in which you and the president tried to reassure some investors there. I'm curious what you said to reassure them, and in turn, what their response to you and to President Park was.
Well, it was true. Some businessmen, especially the foreign businessmen, have some worry about the prospect of the economy, especially by the North Korean military threat. So the presidential visit this time has contributed to addressing the international anxiety of the South Korea's economic future. So it was successful in addressing the so-called Korea discount by the several meetings between the president and the business groups. And also President Park was successfully undertaking her job in inducing foreign investment. For example, we have invited the foreign investment at the amount of $380 million from 7 the U.S. companies, including Boeing. And also they issued the joint statement for the energy cooperation. So all these outcomes in the economic field have shown that the many foreign companies have been relieved or have cleared up their anxiety about the security situation on the Korean Peninsula.
You are an expert in foreign affairs. You served as an assistant secretary for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. When you look at the situation now and you look into the near future, what is your outlook for the situation here on the peninsula?
I think we have to take a look at especially on two very important factors. One factor is North Korea, especially the domestic situation in North Korea. That means we are not sure whether the new leader, Kim Jong-un, has successfully inherited the power from his father. In terms of the institution, it seems that he has succeeded in power transfer in a very stable manner and very swift manner, because he has taken the top seats in the party and the government and also in the military. It seems very nice for him, but in the substantive, power terms, it's not clear that his grip in the power or his grip over his subordinates is firm or not. It's not clear. And when we see the North Korea's decision to close the Kaesong industrial complex, it gave us some suspicion that North Korean leader, his grip to the power is not really almighty, or the military group has more influence in making a decision. And the second factor we have to take a look at is China factor. China seems to shift its, strategic assessment on the strategic value of North Korea. In the past, when that strategic assessment of China will hinge upon the relations between China and the U.S. And also hinge upon the stability on the Korean peninsula. So in order to maintain the stability on the Korean peninsula, China has put great emphasis on the regime survival sometimes and the denuclearization and at the other times. So they are shifting between regime survival and the denuclearization.
And you were a member of President Park's first team of special envoys to go to China. President Park is going to be going there in a few weeks' time to meet with President Xi Jinping. What should be at the very top of the agenda during that meeting?
Well, when I went to China as a member of the special envoy, I met with the many high-ranking officials in the Chinese government, including Mr. Xi Jinping. At that time, Mr. Xi strongly emphasized that China has the consistent policy that denuclearization and the non-proliferation of the WMD, weapons of mass destruction, are the core factors for the peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. And he also strongly argued that China wants to resume the six-party talks and ask the cooperation of the countries concerned. So that means the denuclearization and the resumption of six-party talks are the main interest of China.
In meeting with those high-ranking officials and President Xi, do you get a sense, the international community has a sense that China is losing patience with North Korea? Did you get that sense from the people that you met with?
It was in January, and then at that time many people were curious North Korea would really conduct the third nuclear test or not. And we had the expectation China's,